to welcome everyone to our webinar, Navigating the Uncertainty. My name is John McKenzie. I'm Associate Director based in Sydney. With me is Sarah Pettit, the Associate Director of the business, leading the business migration team. And we've got Dr. Ian Haslam, who is an organisational psychologist. And looking at essentially the emphasis today was going to be on what's happening with the labour force and also vacancies and employment. However, as we know, recently, a recent announcement today that New South Sydney Metro is going to be essentially a 4-week lockdown extension. And there's also extension of restrictions to three new local government areas where only authorised workers are able to leave. But in that context, however, I think it's important we look at these issues from a medium-term perspective. And I think we'll take the information we receive on that basis. So I just want to move to the next slide, Ian. Okay, thanks. Okay, just waiting to do that. Sorry, folks, there we go. Apologies. Ian's given me permission. So we're looking at the content today is the current context. Also, we'll look at labour force and workforce trends and snapshots. We'll look at wages, CPI, and transit enterprise bargaining, which I think is important in the context of wages outcomes. Then the current business migration landscape, and Ian will present on recruitment issues and tips on getting it right. I'm having difficulty moving this for some reason. Yep. Hey, I wonder what's going on there. Oh, what have I done?
So I think Ian might be just resetting. He's just dropped out, so we'll give him a second.
Yep. Apologies, folks. So while we're talking about that, we were looking at the context of today's discussion, as we said, was really concentrating on essentially how the economy's moved since February. So that relates to job vacancies as well as employment, and for that matter, wages. I think it is important to, whilst we're in lockdown and there's lockdown extension in Greater Sydney as well as Victoria's been in lockdown, and I think we need to take it in the medium-term context, I think. So in that context, given that unemployment is under 5%, wages are still in real wages being set in the economy, as well as through enterprise bargaining, is well in excess of inflation, which is currently running at about 1.1%. I think and whilst there's admittedly uncertainty at least in the short term concerning the labour market and the state of the economy, I think that it's important that we have a medium-term perspective about this. And probably just move to particular issues that we might be having with. There we go. There we go. So we might try now. Okay. So Ian, or maybe all right. There we go. Apologies, folks. So maybe, Vanessa, I might get you to drive it. So current context, slow vaccine rollout. We've obviously got new COVID variants. There's more pressure on quarantine in the public health system. the lockdowns, as we know, and border closures are still a primary response to increasing COVID cases. There's certainly uncertainty around state border closures, and obviously a lot of uncertainty around international border closures. And I wrote this paragraph in December last year for a presentation that circumstances change and employers need to continually monitor developments in borders state by state as they impact their operations, and that hasn't changed. So just a workforce snapshot. So 13 million employed persons. There's a decrease of slight decrease from May. Full-time employment compared to part-time employment proportionally is up. So part-time employment is probably lower than what it has been. So it's under a third now of the total workforce. Unemployment, as I said, is under 5%. The lowest is in Victoria, and the highest is in South Australia. Underemployment has obviously come down from the pandemic last year, but it's increased slightly in May to go up. Whilst unemployment's lowest in Victoria, we still have this print concept of underemployment where employers are looking for more work. My take on that is that there's probably some impact of the lockdown in Victoria. We'll probably see those figures in New South Wales in the next quarter. So in terms of the overall assessment of it, whilst monthly hours have decreased from May, probably because of the Victorian lockdown, the hours have increased over the last 12 months, which is higher than the number of employed people. So it's fair to say my assessment of that is that the employers have bitten the bullet and decided to employ more full-time people, I think, given the reduction in part-time workers. Right, so underutilisation rate has increased slightly to about 13%, which is unemployment and underemployment. Participation is steady. Working from home may be a feature for many employers. So there's a recent survey which you might have read, at least in Sydney, 50 large ASX companies. 84% of those companies explicitly confirm the permanent adoption of a hybrid working from home-based employees. So in other words, they'll have some mix of working from home and working in the office, but there's only a small proportion of those who have explicitly stated that there actually be certain days defined. So of that is about just over 10%. So that's significant that certainly employers are looking and moving to more flexible models of employment. So just a quick survey. Vanessa,
I'll just pop a link in the chat box.
Yeah.
Okay, just a moment, everyone. There we go. That's in the chat box now to go and do the poll.
Yeah, so if we can get back to the Prezzo. So it's the questions were what percentage of your workforce are currently working from home in 2021? That is those outside of lockdown. So think back 4 weeks ago, and of those working from home, how many days a week are they working from home outside of lockdown? So can everyone see the poll? I've just got a comment there from Blake, you can't see the poll. I think we have now the poll.
Should be working now. Just hit activate.
Yep, everyone can hit activate and respond to that question. So the question is, do we have a link?
Yeah, it's in the chat box. Can you all see the chat box? I'll just, you click on that link. No. Let me have a look. I've activated it again, so
Start survey.
hit that link again and see if it works this time. We've got someone in there. I think we've got at least one person's found it.
Right, so we just Ian's just sent a link to everyone, so hopefully that will work. Great. Looks like responses are coming in.
There we go. Nice. Got it going.
So we're able to see then the questions. So perhaps go back into the presentation, Vanessa. Right. Okay. So we've got 10 done.
Would you like the results yet or wait a little bit longer?
13 done. Working now, thank you. All right. So we got yep. So those percentages are working from home. And what's the second? How many days a week? So majority are working 3 days a week from home. So interesting the number that everyone's worked. So interesting the percentage with 5 days a week, and then 1 day a week. So it looks like probably what we thought. The majority is currently is 3 days, probably 30% of 2 days. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll get those stats and send them to you with the presentation, so you've got it, so you can have a look at it in your own time. But we might press on given the time. We'll head back to the Prezzo. Yep. So if you could, give us, okay, great. Thanks, Vanessa. Yeah, so job vacancies, this is one of the reasons why we're here, is that there's certainly been an increase in job vacancies, a large increase from February, almost 25%. Private sector vacancies were higher than public sector, obviously. The biggest percentage change was in Victoria, then Queensland and New South Wales. The highest number of vacancies, however, are in New South Wales, followed by Victoria and Queensland. And the sectors are there. So if you have a look at your particular sector, you'll see the number of vacancies in the particular sector. So highest in administrative support services, and then healthcare, social assistance. Okay. So wages and CPI, well above the wages, well above currently CPI. CPI is currently 1.1%. The highest weekly average ordinary time earnings is in the ACT, followed by WA. So you can see the increases in average weekly ordinary time earnings for the 12 months to November last year. Unfortunately, we don't get anything later than this. It's 3.2%. Certainly, certainly a lot higher than CPI. We just might move on. Right. So, and then these figures are supported by what's trends in enterprise bargaining. So, average annualised wage increase hasn't changed from December, so they're still trending at 2.6% for the December and March quarters. The increases are higher in the particular states of Victoria. Queensland is 2.5% and New South Wales is 2.3%. For current agreements, that in other words, those are in operation as at March this year, the average increase is 2.6. So the same as the March quarter. Okay, we'll move on. Employees covered by enterprise agreements is down slightly, so it was 1.89 million, and then we've got the total number of employees covered by agreements is almost 40%. Yep. And then, all right, we'll just hand it over to Sarah, so she can take us through the current business migration landscape. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, John. Okay, great. I'll just give myself access. Beautiful. Okay, so it's been a little while since we've all gotten together. I think it was December last year. I got to have a chat with everybody in respect of the skill migration trends and updates. So we've been through some lockdowns, still currently in lockdown, some homeschooling, dodged a couple of bullets here in WA. And we've been navigating and I guess learning to live with what seems to be the not so new norm. International border restrictions, as we all know, are still in place, and it's a tougher labour market with businesses finding it, I guess, increasingly difficult to fill their vacancies with local hires. They're the conversations I've been having with our clients over the last 6 months in respect of, I guess, fishing from the same pool of talent and finding it difficult to attract or find local talent. So we've got, organizations now considering, what their onshore sponsorship options are, as well as looking further afield to the international market. But I guess my messaging today is not all doom and gloom. There have been some great changes implemented to assist business with the pressure of filling skilled roles. And I'm hopeful that over the coming months, we'll see some further positive changes from the government in respect of skill migration. So I guess my first slide, I wanted to give you an overview of some of the skill migration trends and updates from the budget handed down this year, which are not actually too different to last year. The planning levels have remained the same at 160,000 places. The distribution of the places will also remain at similar levels. The family stream visas will get an allocation of 77,300 available places. Now that's just available places. That's not visas that they'll grant in that period. They have been quite slow in granting some of the family stream partner and parent visas. There's a good 24-month wait on, if not more, on partner visas, and a good 4 to 5 years on getting contributory parent visas granted. The remainder of the places will go to skill visas, giving priority to employer-sponsored, business innovation, investor and global talent visas. And this is all in a bid to attract talent to Australia and help to stimulate the economy. The humanitarian program will remain at 13,750 places. However, net overseas migration is expected to fall from 154,000 people from 2019-20 to around negative 72,000 by the end of this year. So hopefully we'll start to see a gradual increase to about 201,000 skilled migrants in 23-24. So that, I guess, leads us to Scott Morrison's chat a couple of weeks ago in respect of the 4 phases that Australia is going through right now, currently in the suppression phase, and our path out of lockdown, and these border restrictions, not only internationally but nationally. Obviously, vaccination is key to allowing our borders to open further into phase 2. And myself and our immigration team nationally have started to notice changes to the current travel exemption criteria, where the government are now asking whether our clients have been vaccinated before they either leave or come to Australia. I guess this will be our passport out of this suppression phase into phase 2. I guess with the border restrictions that are currently in place, again, both nationally and internationally, it's exacerbated the skills shortage for many industries. So we're glad to see some positive changes that have been coming out from the government and have been announced over the last few months in an aid to, I guess, assist in the economic recovery of Australia while our borders remain closed. I'll just go to the next slide. So I'll take you through some of the positive changes that we've been seeing over the last few months. Some might be of interest to you, some may not, so I won't dwell on this one for too long. But with the introduction of the subclass 408 temporary activity COVID stream visa, this subclass has been around for some years. However, the COVID stream visa was introduced over, I think, 12 to 18 months ago to assist individuals on visas in Australia who were caught out by, I guess, the COVID pandemic and the lack of available flights to get home, or perhaps have been stood down by their employer around March, April last year. This has been a great visa for those who have been stuck in those situations, especially for those who've been in working in critical sectors such as aged care, childcare, hospitality, tourism, but also for those who've had no other visa option. And if they could demonstrate they were unable to leave Australia during the pandemic. So we've been utilizing this 408 visa as a last resort for those who fall into those critical sectors, but also for those who are have an ever looming visa expiry coming their way. So this year, some changes were implemented to the program where those now working in critical sectors can obtain up to a 12-month validity on this 408 visa if they fall into critical sectors such as agriculture, food processing, healthcare, aged care, disability care, childcare, and tourism and hospitality. So again, this is all in a bid to help stimulate growth and business opportunities for those industries. I guess with the border closures over the last 18 months, we've had no student visa holders come to Australia. We've had no working holiday visa holders, and they would usually be, I guess, the people who would fill those roles in hospitality and tourism, disability care, childcare, and those seasonal workers in the agricultural sector as well. So it's good to see these changes, and hopefully we'll start to see more as the months go on with continued lobbying from industry, as well as ourselves in the migration space. Student visa holders in April this year, if working in hospitality, tourism, aged care, disability services, agriculture, those actually working in supermarkets or distribution facilities where in an area where they've been impacted by COVID lockdowns, have had their working hours restrictions removed. So as long as they remain employed in those industries, they can work full time. The current restrictions to student visa holders is 40 hours a fortnight of allowable work activities. So this has really helped out a lot of our clients who are currently in the hospitality and tourism space, as well as aged care and childcare. I'll just go on to the next slide. Okay. So we've also seen some changes to the specific Pacific labour visa stream, the subclass 403. Extensions are available to those currently onshore holding this visa to assist with work in regional area. This will continue through to April 2022. So our main focus over the last 18 months has been the travel exemptions. So although the international borders are closed, we have been extremely busy in assisting our corporate clients with getting their skilled workers into Australia. And with the travel exemptions currently in place, depending on the critical sector or the critical skill of the individual, will dictate whether we can get those individuals into the country or not. So we can still lodge visas, they can sit there, they'll wait to be processed, they may or may not be processed. So without this travel exemption, we're not going to be able to get your skilled worker into the country. So that's usually the first thing we would look at and consider when we're assisting you navigate an international hire. So currently the travel exemption eligibility has a list of about 8 exemptions available to industry. 3 we use most frequently. That's the priority skilled occupation list, which is there to facilitate entry into Australia for certain occupations. We've had 22 occupations added to the list in the last month, with one as recently as yesterday, pharmacist. So creating a 42 priority occupation list that will exempt individuals from the current border restrictions. They'll still have to make an application to be eligible to travel, but if they're on that priority list of occupations, they'll have a travel exemption granted and thereafter a visa approval. So in addition to the occupations that were added last month, we've had a chef added to the list, quite a number of engineering occupations, as well as your CEOs, accountants, nursing, veterinary, general practitioners, and quite a few occupations in the information technology space as well. So all these addition of occupations to the priority list is a clear indication that the government are hearing industry, I think, with all the lobbying that's been going on, and I guess the noise businesses are making. The government are trying to assist and alleviate, I guess, the issues and impacts that COVID have had economically on people's businesses. However, if your occupation is not on the priority skilled occupation list, that doesn't mean you're not eligible to get a visa approved. If you fall into a critical sector or your applicant has a critical skill, you can still look to apply for a travel exemption. There's two pathways in respect of border force travel exemptions, and that's those with critical skills required to maintain the supply of essential goods and services, such as in medical technology, critical infrastructure, telecommunications, engineering and mining, supply chain, aged care. I could go on, there's plenty of them, maritime industry. And then the other alternative is those delivering services in sectors critical to Australia's economic recovery, such as fintech, large-scale manufacturing, film, media, television, emerging technology, where we can demonstrate that no Australian worker is available to do that job. So it's good to see the changes. In June, there was an announcement from the acting Prime Minister to deliver a new agriculture visa to assist those in the farming community. This will hopefully be introduced by the end of September 21, just in time for the harvesting season, and a critical time for Australia's agricultural businesses. This new visa will provide greater access to overseas workers to help ease a growing shortage of farm workers due to, I guess, not having those student visa holders or those working holiday backpackers coming in to do the seasonal work. The agriculture visa will be open to the UK and 10 countries from ASEAN. I won't list them, I think they're listed on the slide. So some positive changes there that we're seeing, which I'm quite excited about, and I guess it starts to take the pressure off a little bit, and we know we can start assisting even more businesses with getting their skilled workers into the country as well. So impacts of COVID on skill migration, I guess they're pretty self-explanatory. Obviously, we're going to have a negative net migration, creating a skills shortage in most industries, the border closures, caps on international arrivals, no new students, no working holiday visa makers, mass exodus of skilled workers last year at the peak of COVID has all resulted in this skills shortage that we're constantly hearing our clients talk about and I guess have concerns about. And I guess now is the time to be proactive in respect of, you know, looking at your policies and procedures in respect of your recruitment, which Ian will touch on shortly. So, you know, I don't know if it's going to get worse or it's going to stabilize right now, but if the borders don't reopen soon, and that's obviously pending on vaccinations and how that rolls out, at least we can see that there are some positive changes being made, and industry is being heard, and we need to keep this up so we can see further changes to the program and border restrictions. I'd love to see some trades occupations on the priority skilled occupation list. I think since I've been in migration, diesel motor mechanics and fitters seem to be those that are in demand. So, you know, we have vacancies in businesses increasing, vacancies been open for longer, companies having to turn away work or not meet contractual obligations and deadlines. You know, we can hear people just scrambling to fill roles and put someone in a seat and perhaps not really think about the fit within the organization. And some industry sectors perhaps are offering a little bit more in way of wages just to attract the talent where they're competing nationally for local hires. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes in the coming months. So what's the government doing to help? So there's definitely been some good things happening in this side of migration. So with all the welcome changes that I've just touched on briefly, there's also an ongoing inquiry since March of this year into the effectiveness of the skill migration program. So Mapien had the opportunity to present a submission and attend a hearing. One of our principal consultants, Samantha Norman, in our Queensland office, put a fantastic submission together and attended a hearing by the Joint Standing Committee last month in respect of that. And it was an opportunity for us to speak on behalf of our clients and the migration industry. We've been in it for quite a long time. So it allowed us to highlight what parts of the program need to change to help everybody. So the objective of the inquiry was to look at the immediate adjustments that need to be made in the context of future work and pandemic recovery, which we've seen some positive changes to date. Looking at the long-term structural changes, considering perhaps merging the lists of occupations. There's lists coming out our ears, so it's good to see there's some consideration about merging the occupation list back together. Potential changes to the training levy payment, maybe having a 4-year visa validity for everyone with a pathway to residency to help us attract and retain our talent from overseas. Looking actually deeper dive into the skills list. Are they actually meeting industry needs and keeping pace with the Australian job landscape? Looking at the cost of sponsoring, it's not a cheap option, but it is definitely a good one if you find the right person. Again, reviewing the complexity of the program. Is it easy enough to navigate? And also looking at the labour market requirements. If you haven't dabbled in the 482 or 494 employer-sponsored space, there is a requirement to test the local labour market before you make an offer to an international hire. There are some concessions and exemptions in respect of that, but not many. They're mostly under the international trade obligations. So the Department of Education, Skills and Employment and the National Skills Commission has also released a report just recently outlining the occupations that are in shortage nationally. I'm happy to send the link later if anyone wants to have a look at it. It is a great list to review, and it's some good fodder for us when we're writing our travel exemption requests. But the NSC has responsibility for providing trusted and independent intelligence on Australia's labour market. So a key deliverable for them in this role is the skills priority list. So it's a good list to look at. Got lots of trade occupations on there, which is music to my ears right now while I'm banging my head against the wall trying to get trades occupations into the country. But this list will provide a backbone piece of the labour market analysis on occupations that will be key input to a range of Australian government policies, initiatives, including targeting of the skill migration program, potentially apprenticeship incentives and training funding. All these combined hopefully should see some further positive changes. So what can we do to ensure you guys are filling your vacancies with the right people? And I won't talk to this slide too much. It is my last slide, and Ian will give us all we need to know in respect of that next. But I guess just a couple of key points to think about that I've pulled out of conversations that I've had over the last couple of months with varying industries is that if you're obviously starting to feel the pinch in the talent pool, now is the time to start reviewing your international recruitment policies and processes. Some of us probably haven't looked at them for quite some time because we've been finding it quite straightforward to find talent onshore. But if you're nervous about international hires or can't wait for the process to be undertaken, then perhaps consider looking at sponsoring individuals who are currently onshore in Australia, already holding a visa. There's plenty out there who are looking to be sponsored and get on board. I guess then once you've exhausted the local labour market, including Australian and sponsored hires, then we can start to look further afield to the international market. Other countries are doing it right now, such as Canada, New Zealand and the UK, and attracting top talent to their countries. So we need to have a good, policy in respect of attracting talent, and I guess what is their main driver for them leaving their home country location to come to Australia. Usually for most people, it's the right to permanently reside here in the future would be their long-term plans. So I'd also recommend looking at your current relocation policies, dust them off if you've not looked at them for a while. And do you know what you're going to offer an international hire by way of relocation package? Are you going to cover the cost of their visa application and moving their family here? You're going to give them a 20-foot container to move their furniture or just a relocation allowance? I used to be heavily involved in this quite a few years ago, and I'm sure it'll be quite different now in respect of what's going to be on offer. And I guess the most important thing is to get the right fit. And that leads me to hand over to Ian to talk about recruitment issues and tips on getting it right.
All right. Thanks very much, guys. And that's a pretty good segue into the remainder of the webinar. And following my little section here, we'll also open it up and read out some of the questions that might have popped up through the Q&A panel just there, as well as we've been moving through the material. And just by way of introduction, I know a few attendees I saw on the registration list might know me. So my name is Ian Haslam. Professionally obligated to put the doctor there, but I won't often pull that one out, but it's there. Let's just move on from that one and talk about the fact that I'm a senior consultant within the Mapien team, specifically organizational development, and I'm an organizational psychologist as well. So the role that I play is to lead the psychometric assessment function within Mapien, not just from a selection perspective, but also from development as well. But in my role, I do provide a lot of guidance and support and consult to things, not only in terms of using testing in selection processes, but supporting recruiters, supporting small to medium enterprises, just in the selection decisions, like in terms of the process, in terms of what steps, managing candidates, sourcing the right one. So just through my experience, I've worked with many talent acquisition managers and consultants internally, and also agency recruiters as well, and getting a real strong sense of what I've been seeing, I guess, in terms of the trends this year, relative to what we generally see year to year, when it's not the second year of a global pandemic, and getting selection right in 2021, I've really very strongly noticed has come to the fore pretty strongly. And one of the reasons for that is not that there's new challenges, it's that there's old challenges that we've overcome that have really re-emphasized or have come up in ways that we might not have seen before in different contexts. And again, there's just such a turbulent environment, particularly within Australia, but also internationally as well, where there's different challenges popping up, and we're having to deal with different regions and contexts as we go, almost learning on the fly again. But in terms of the trends that we're seeing popping up in 2021, this is actually a stat that John raised in one of his first slides. I happened to stumble upon the same one, but vacancies are increasing. They increased at the back end of 2020, coming into Christmas, and then from about February onwards this year, they've really launched. And so obviously this has changed and differed depending on state and jurisdiction as well. But generally speaking, that increase has been there. And I guess with that change, and we've seen restrictions, we've seen people being recruited from different ends of the country, border restrictions not allowing face-to-face, or even current lockdowns and still recruitment processes needing to happen. So in that context, we've also been seeing a lot more use of technology in selection processes, whether it be using Zoom for an interview, or using a different method to implement reference checking or video interviews and pre-recording. And obviously the technological usages of testing and test use as well. So technology is on the rise, and learning that, and then overcoming the different kinks and processes, and ensuring that's an efficient process as well. But what we've seen, and this is the one that's kind of popped up as being a little bit of a surprise, is that there's now just such a scramble to fill those roles, with vacancies high, with lots of talent floating around out there. Possibly for the first time in a while, these people have been cut loose and are looking for new roles, and they're carrying around a lot of talent, a lot of ability and experience. And so there's pressure to nab those people and to get them in under the desk and onboarding as quickly as possible. And some bad decisions are being made, quick, hasty decisions. And I've seen it a couple of times. It's not that common, but when you see it, it does have an impact. And it's down to situations where you want to secure that person that you were so sure is just going to be spot on for your team, such a perfect fit. So the corners are cut in terms of those standard processes to fill it, or to make sure that the business, just in terms of strategy, you're rebuilding and making gains on the potential losses, perceived losses of 2020, but also to expedite the process almost as a competition, to get ahead of the competition and secure that newly dislodged talent, to get ahead in the market, to actually use the disruption as a competitive process. Which is clever, but then again, the selection processes tend to take a risk. And so in that rush of process, you can start seeing some mistakes creep in terms of making that bad hire. And this is a concept that I have covered once or twice before, because it is something that I'm very, very passionate about, is the idea that there is actually a massive, enormous, monumental cost to a bad hire. They can really, they can cripple you. If you're a small to medium enterprise, a very high stakes bad hire can have an enormous impact on people, on revenue, on just the general culture and feel of the place, because they have such a big impact on things. But to break it down, we know the direct costs. I'll cover them in a second, but the indirect costs are just so much more, and there's a massive variety of range of money associated with it, a pure dollar value. But in terms of direct costs, having to first hire, take the time to realize they're not the best fit, and then to rehire again. The direct costs are fairly standard, straightforward. So things like your recruiting fees, whether it's your reliance on an agency recruiter, or just the overheads of your talent acquisition team to get the job done in the first place, and to redo that work as well. So the time spent, the salary, both outgoing and incumbent, in terms of the lower levels of productivity for the outgoing, and the ramping up, the scaling up of your new, the training associated with that, possible legal costs associated with the removal of the prior hire, and the cost to rehire again, re-advertising, re-going to a recruiter, and those costs are required. You want to be able to source from a dedicated recruiting professional high talent. Again, that costs money. So those are your direct costs, and we can attribute a dollar value to that, almost to the cent. But where we lose that, where it becomes a bit more opaque and also much larger in quantity, are the indirect costs. Things like culture and engagement, things like the toxic impact potentially around this employee, things like resentment to that hire for lack of productivity, all those interpersonal issues, the things that don't necessarily allow them to gel, because they might be the most talented technician in terms of that technocrat approach, but if they don't gel with the team, it's just not going to work. We know this, the work is not just the task, it's the people and relationships as well, a big part of the hiring process. And this comes down, those indirect costs to split it all out in terms of productivity, reduce productivity for the new hire. We can't just expect them to hit the ground sprinting to start with. The training, the higher workloads as well for those staff that are there still picking up the slack, high levels of fatigue. So while they're taking time to fill those gaps, their productivity is being reduced as well. And then there's just the attitudinal things, the resentment, the fact that there is more work to do, and a strong culture, a culture of productivity, of connectivity, of teamwork, honesty, authenticity. Those are all amazing things, but we all, do have a level of emotionality associated with that. We're all human beings, and therefore we're going to feel that, and those emotions do impact on our productivity, the way that we work, and the way that we communicate as well. So these are all things that can kind of pop out, and I guess that it's interesting. You go for a search and you look through anecdotal or effectively brought together figures, and they actually vary wildly. Things like between 50 and 250% of the new hire's salary in terms of how much they cost. Again, 30 to 150. They've tried to approximate $240,000 on average to onboard, and this ramps up with seniority of the placement as well. So there's actually a famous quote, an ex-now CEO of a company named Zappos in America, who estimated that the combined total of the cost of his bad hires was well over $100 million, and that's not just the direct ones, indirect as well. Because it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money when there's a little bit of investment to start with that can actually help out. And that's the time taken to make the correct process, and any investment in terms of tools, bringing in expertise in order to help you, those recruiters, that sort of thing. But what we found, and definitely in this environment as well, just considering the fact that we're trying to maximize margin, minimize any costs, any extant costs, the budgeting is still generally, it's tight. Purse strings are being tightened. But what I found personally, and I think that we can probably generalize this to other consultants in the business, and I'm sure that you as our viewers are actually, you're in the same boat as well, where there is vigilance on money. Investment is still being made to make the right decisions, early on in the piece. And in terms of direct cost that you can attribute a dollar value to, psychometric testing, is still actually one of those costs that are being committed to in terms of slowing down decision making, seeking other inputs, other data, and then making a much more, I guess, confident and objectively correct decision in terms. And you're never going to get it right, but the more information you have, the more pieces of that jigsaw puzzle, the greater the picture you're going to see. But having said that as well, having that position in place, those selection activities, placing them all there is fine and well and good and best practice to plan for. They can still be neglected, and I still see that less and less, you know, in recent months. I think probably towards the start of the year, we definitely did see a little bit of that. It's, well, we want to make the right decisions, so let's implement a psychometric test. Let's just do it, get them to do it. All right, they've done it, move them through. With the outcome of the results actually not being paid attention to. You know, you'll have the test there, you know, we've done it, so let's move on. But having said that, there could be one or more significant red flags, you know, within that test, which then you would be looking to follow up with on an interview or something similar. You know, a reference check at the very least to validate that. But a lot of those findings can either be misinterpreted or disregarded completely. And therefore the value of that little investment being disregarded to then open the door to a much bigger unintentional investment in having to rehire again. There's also the overall emphasizing of the test outcome. So like I said, you could be disregarding, but you might see a significant red flag within your testing and think to yourself, well, look, they're very clever. Look how great they are at problem solving. Look at this long list of their qualifications, their achievements, key achievements. Their resume is top notch, fantastic. You know what we'll do with maybe some interpersonal conflict. Maybe we'll have to just onboard them better or manage them better, put in place some sort of a training method. But you know what, with that in mind, it's still a lot of work and there's still a lot of overhead there. Or there's the over. You know, you've got a really, really great candidate, but you're possibly their problem solving, the numerical reasoning, for example, might be just below, well above average. Well, you know, numbers are everything, so let's make a decision based on that one data point. Again, you know, there's a problem of going the other way, because while testing is useful, it does have its limitations, and it does need to be considered in conjunction with a lot of other selection methods and just taking the entire decision holistically. I guess the other way that you look at it is that, and this is a bugbear of mine, just with my own background. I'm a psychologist, organizational psychologist, statistician, psychometrician. I build tests. I know what a good test looks like. There's a valid and reliable test as just a ticket to play in terms of using your testing. So there's the considerations to think about, and these are concepts that you ideally need to talk to your recruiter about, or think for yourself, or to talk to, if you have a psychometric test supplier, talk to them about it. Is this set of tests that I'm putting forward for my candidate appropriate for the role? If I'm using a set of abilities assessments, is this norm group, is the difficulty associated with that appropriate for this level? Do I need an absolutely sharpshooting problem solver, or do I need someone who can just solve basic problems and deal with that day to day? That kind of thing, and a valid and reliable personality measure, safety measure, whatever you're using, as long as you know that there's a valid and reliable test in there. And to be honest, you know, the stats that sit there, they're kind of inaccessible if you're for the uneducated. But if you ask your supplier for that information, while they might not give you exact figures, they should have an answer for you, you know, and to be able to give you things like, here's the comparison group, here's how it was validated, and that kind of thing. And it's the comparison group, like I said as well, it's, you know, are the people that this candidate's being compared to, are they from the same pool? And therefore, do I have a good understanding of who they are? But even testing notwithstanding, the section of the selection process that probably requires the greatest amount of purposeful objectivity is the interview, whether it be first or second, and ideally it's for both. But when interviews are unstructured, or if they don't follow a specific set of questions that are framed in a behavioral way, that might be tapping into past behavior, even with a scoring model, for example, to be able to objectively compare candidates based on an objective score of behaviors that they've explained. That's kind of best practice, but a lot of the time there'll be a sense of, well, I know who they are, I can see who they are. If I have a casual chat, maybe I get to know who they are as a person, and that allows me to feel a sense of affinity. I like them, I've got a good gut feel about this person. Unfortunately, the downside of gut feel is that it's often driven not only by our emotionality, but also our unconscious biases that sit deep within our brains that we actually have no control over whatsoever. And the chances are, if we have a gut feel about someone that's good, it's because they're like us, and we like people who are like us. So the way to get around that is to design a behavioral interview question guide that looks specifically at behavior, not what they're like, not if you like them, what they did in the past according to that specific competency, direct behaviors, and to be able to score them effectively as well. 1 to 5. Didn't meet, kind of met, nailed it. And if you've got those behaviors and you're able to attribute that to their behavior and their answer, you can score them. You can compare candidates, and you can totally disregard any gut feel that you have, because you've got this quantitative piece of evidence. You've got their tests. You've got any follow-ups as well for a second interview based on the testing and based on the results of that interview as well, which kind of leads to the selection process itself. And just from my own experience in terms of best practice, the order is actually entirely up to you. The order comes down to who you have at your disposal, how much time you have. Ideally, the shorter the length of time that you have, the more you want to place these pieces in, these steps in, because it forces you to slow your thinking down. It means that you don't make a rash decision. It means that you don't use the quick decision making in your brain, which is again based on biases and by emotion as well. So if you adequately assess their CV and their cover letter, are they motivated? Have they actually detailed exactly why they want to work for you specifically, or have they thrown a scattergun type of thing at you? Then testing, maybe a first interview, then maybe a second interview with the hiring manager, and then a reference check, or the other way around. So another way to go might be to again look at the CV, the cover letter, the application form, what have you, conducting a first interview, following up that first interview with the psychometric test, which will then allow you to look at the test outcome, validate and maybe draw comparisons between what you saw in the interview and the test outcomes, to then populate and inform a second interview to confirm some things, to explore some things, and then reference checking, and away we go. In the current landscape, we also have a scenario where we might have a single role or 1 or 2 and a lot of applicants all together at the same time, in which case we have a much larger pool to borrow from, and it's much, much harder to be able to use the similar process. So again, you'd be using something a little bit more, maybe some technology around it. So for their CV, their cover letter, these can actually be managed much more intricately and with a little bit more accuracy now with modern applicant tracking systems that can parse the CVs, parse the cover letters to pull out the factors that you need to give you an idea of where the talent is. Moving into a multi-step process. And this is where you can be more flexible with use of testing. Abilities first to screen for talent. Now that we know that we've got a group of people who generally speaking have a CV that we find as attractive, who's the best problem solver? Where's the likely talent sitting? So then the abilities testing comes in. Maybe a first interview if there's lots of people, asking everyone to complete a 10-minute video interview using a platform. Moving through to insights testing. So you've got their abilities, you've got the fact that they can maybe string a sentence together and provide some evidence of who they are, and then some insights, so some personality, emotional intelligence, safety awareness, anything that's relevant to your position, personality at the very least. You want to know who they are and what their preferences are, which can then inform a second interview and then reference checking. And you can really drill down many, many candidates, hundreds of candidates, down to your preferred 2 or 3 quite quickly using those filters. And that kind of brings me to the end, and where we've got a little bit of time left for questions after this as well. But really I guess the message I wanted to convey is that we all are in such a hurry to get back into the swing of things. You know, we're still in partial lockdowns, full lockdowns. We have companies with multiple offices, some of which are locked down, some are not, you know, client bases here and there, and they're all trying to follow the same process. And it's about getting ahead of the game and trying to get the talent back and to get things moving quicker than expected, or quicker than our competitors, or quicker than we want to, so that we can keep on rushing and rebuild. But thinking about and keeping that in mind, we don't want to rush. We don't want to bring in people that are going to put us back, you know, 2 months instead of saving us a week. So have the patience. Have the patience to allow the right candidate time to apply. Keep your job ad open. If you feel like you don't quite have who you need to, leave it open another week. The person that you need might have only left their job 3 or 4 days after you apply, after you advertised. It's just a matter of waiting and deepening your pool. Another one is expectations can be a killer. So your candidate that is perfect for you might look very different to what you originally pictured. And you'll only know that once you run them through a multi-step process to really get to know them deeply. You might feel, once you find the perfect candidate, that you want to expedite the process. But I do implore you to trust the process. Little things pop up, little things that you might disregard because they seem perfect. All of a sudden, that entire wave of imperfectness crushes you. And you end up in a situation where you then have to quickly refill that position a matter of weeks later. Which brings me to the final point, is that there is no such thing as a perfect candidate. There's a candidate with potential. There's a candidate who has the talent. But if they're coachable, if they have the interpersonal fit, you can make them the perfect employee, even if they didn't come in as the perfect candidate. But there's no such thing. So that's kind of it for me today. We'll move on to the question tab. And seeing as we know that's questions, what I'll do is stop sharing the screen. So just from a questioning perspective, Vanessa, were there any that popped up in the Q&A pane that we wanted to have a look at?
No, nothing's come through just yet, but maybe if anyone wants to start dropping some questions in there now.
Brilliant. Bearing in mind as well, if we're still thinking about questions as it is now, we'll leave you an opportunity to send us any that you might have to be able to have us answer them directly as well, or to shoot it through to someone who can give you a much more full result.
I guess from a question to Sarah. So given that we've got a number of areas in lockdown, particularly Greater Sydney and as well as Melbourne, and you still have issues concerning recruitment, what's your suggested advice? Are you looking at least the next month, or how would you approach it?
Sorry, John, was that question for me? You dropped out at the beginning. Sorry, I didn't hear the beginning. Yeah.
So, given the time frames where I mean, it's a question around time frames. If you're looking at recruiting either somebody here on a visa or somebody internationally, sort of what should, given that, and we've got a lockdown for 4 weeks, what should employees be doing? What sort of time frames are you looking at in terms of business migration?
Yeah, for sure. No problem. Good question. So look, for any international hires offshore, I would say give it about 3 to 5 months before getting the individual here. For those currently onshore, I guess depending on what visa they're holding and what visa we're going to apply for, you need at least 2 to 3 months before you get them onboarded and have their visa finalized. Yeah,
so this is really a medium term. Employers should be looking really at their, for the at least full financial year. Should be looking at forward planning, putting aside lockdown. As Ian has mentioned, that we're not looking at the short term. We're looking at probably, as I said, the medium term. So it's really these are medium term, longer term considerations here.
For sure. And look, it can all move as quickly as the business and the potential talent can provide us with the documentation. That process may take 4 to 6 weeks, depending on where they need to get their documentation from. Once the visa is lodged, then it's in the hands of the immigration department. Their current processing times, they're saying 5 to 9 months for a standard 482. However, what we run in conjunction with the 482 is the travel exemption that's required to get them on the plane and get them here. So once we lodge the visa, we lodge the travel exemption with our strong business case. If they're on the priority list of occupations, we'll see that through hopefully within 3 to 7 business days, and then the visa approval to follow suit shortly thereafter. If they're in the critical skill or critical sector, same length of processing time as well. I guess the biggest pain point our clients are having at the moment is finding flights. So we have applicants rolling up to the airport with their family in tow and their suitcases and told, sorry, we've met our international cap for this week for WA. You'll just have to rebook and wait for the next flight. So I think Western Australia are only taking 500 international arrivals a week. I think there's 3,100 nationally. And that's going to remain at that level until we go into phase 2, which is, you know, I don't know whether that's 80 or 90% vaccination nationally. I don't know what that's going to look like, but that's where we currently are. We've had a few people email us overnight to say they can't get a direct flight to WA, so they're going to go and quarantine in the Northern Territory for 2 weeks and then have to quarantine in WA for 2 weeks because of the current border restrictions, or into Adelaide. And then, so it's you've got to factor all that in, the cost of quarantining as well. And, you know, it's an ever moving piece. So once they get here, if the national borders are open, great. If they're not, you're stuck, and you have to wait for those to reopen. WA have an iron wall around them at the moment, so we're very quick to put a border in place. So yeah, it's definitely been an interesting couple of weeks, these last few weeks.
Yeah, I think that employers should take that into consideration as well, that currently there's the numbers of being allowed into the various states have decreased. South Wales are still taking the bulk.
Yeah.
And it's hoped there's less people coming to those shows such as Big Brother and Co. So wasting a seat for someone who deserves it.
That's it.
I don't think I think we're out of time. Unless anyone's got any other questions, I think we'll end it there. Ian and Sarah. And Vanessa, thanks very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, John.
Nice.
Thanks, Ian.
Great.
Thanks,
Good
Vanessa.
attending, everyone.
Okay.
In summary, we would normally, thanks for your patience with the earlier presentation earlier on. What we'll do is make the presentation available with the statistics on the working from home in that presentation. Thanks very much. Bye.